Welcome to Takes on Talent, an internal mini-series from Higher Learning by MSH. This isn't your typical podcast on business full of buzzwords or sanitized leadership takes. These are going to be real conversations with people who are in the foxhole, dealing with talent and talent issues on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it's going to be sharp and incisive. Sometimes it might be a little bit sideways. But if you want to hear everything that's going on when it comes to talent, whether it be current events, what's in the news, or just trends that we see, this is the place to be. It's messy, it's honest. It's what happens when people in the hiring world stop filtering and start saying what they actually think. So if you're here for polished panels and LinkedIn platitudes, this is probably the wrong place. This is Takes on Talent, brought to you by MSH Talent Solutions and Aon Hire. My friends, welcome to what is not higher learning. It's an internal MSH Aon conversation. Today we're going to talk about team building, and I'm joined by two people who know teams and high-performing teams better than just about anybody I know, at least within the confines of our company. We'll go that far. So joining today, me, Rashid, is Matt Gorman, our Chief Revenue Officer, and then employed number two, always fashionable, wearing is that Tommy Bahama, my friend?
Think so.
Excellent. Looking a little ethereal, like you just rose out of a spirit as a ghost. We won't. There you go. It's Corey Burness, VP of Talent Solutions here at MSH. So guys, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time, obviously, out of your busy work days. I think this is really important. It's a topic that I care deeply about. You know, we're building software that ultimately is going to lead to, building the highest performing teams for our customers. And so that's something I wanted to talk about today. And I want to start here. I want to know from both of you, what's the best team you've ever been a part of or led? And then I want to know what made it exceptional. And it can be sports, it can be business, it can be class project, it can be anything. Corey, let's start with you.
Best team I've ever been a part of, outside of my current team, obviously, at MSH, right? I'll just save that for later in the show. Do have one example maybe from growing up, played a lot of sports. Baseball was kind of the go-to for me. So we did a lot of travel ball as a young kid, went on tournaments kind of all throughout the country, and kind of helped groom me for high school baseball, which in South Florida, growing up down here, is a really big deal. Very competitive in high school. And, I went to a smaller Catholic private school that wasn't quite on the map just yet. We weren't really quite known for our athletics. It was more for our academics, but we had a really, really phenomenal team. And just guys that looked after one another. So, very diverse pool of obviously talent in South Florida, baseball players coming from, Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County. It was what we like to call a hotbed of kind of the best available from each area coming together on the same team. And without knowing each other, as a freshman, you're trying to learn the ways of going to high school and meeting new people and learning the academic side, which for me, I'd never gone to a private school before. So trying to get up to speed in terms of a lot of the rigor and structure coming from a public school, but also learning high school baseball. So for me, started from the coaches and the staff down to the players and my teammates. Frankly, I knew one person in the whole school. Thankfully, it was a good buddy of mine. We played ball together. So we leaned on each other to, let's say, get up to speed at the varsity level. But we made a heck of a run there towards the end of the season, making the district finals and playing against a couple of juggernaut schools down in Miami, which if you were asking me at the beginning of the year whether we'd be ready for that, I'd tell you absolutely not. And I think what did it was just the group of guys that we had, and like just feeling of purpose, this feeling of just looking after each other, having each other's backs, and loving the game of baseball, but loving playing the game of baseball with each other. And I think like any high-performing team, what really defines that is people that look after each other, support each other, and make it fun, make it exciting, and give you a sense of purpose. And that I really had, and that was kind of one of the first forays that I had in terms of like a true team playing for something together as a unit, which I think really helped set me up for my career and professional life.
So Corey, the baseball team you were talking about, that you were in private school, like, did you won the Florida championship then? Multiple championships, or?
So the school, we did not win the state title that year. We won the district title, which for us was a big deal. We had never done that before in the school's history. Unfortunately, we did not make it to the state championship that season, but believe it or not, after I left the school, I think they went on like a 5 or 6 year in a row run. So I like to say we were the reason why that happened. We set the foundation for that program, but we did not win the state title that year.
No, sweet high performing team. Jeez. Okay, well then let me ask this: at what moment outside of results or scores did you know that you had a special team dynamic? Like, what was it? What did it feel like? Like, what did you see?
Yeah, so like practice was a big deal for us. Obviously, you want to go to the games and you play once, maybe twice a week, the Friday night lights, and really enjoy that. But what makes a great team is you're practicing and working on your craft, right? So a lot of it for me was the experience that I had with the group, both on the field and off the field. We would do a lot of things together, team building things, right? As a kind of a collective unit. That's what creates the bond, right? So that when you go out in the field, you can perform. It's just a lot of the conversations and banter and just stuff that baseball players do, right? You give each other a hard time and mess around and stuff like that, which keeps it light, it keeps it fun, especially for a competitive sport. And so I look at the personalities of the people that we have, like any family or high performing team, you have a lot of diversity of thought and opinion and personalities, backgrounds of people and stuff like that. And it's a really good group of guys and the coaching staff as well. So we kept it light and fun, and it just really made you enjoy, much like work, right? It just made you really enjoy showing up for your guys, going to practice, working on your craft, but doing it with people that you really enjoy being around.
All right. So Matt, what about you? What was the best team that you either led or been a part of?
Yeah. So I think it's a great question. Outside of my current team, of course, which is exceptionally high performing and the best I've ever been part of, I'll go more of a professional route. My first real foray into our industry, I worked for, a relatively small regional staffing business that was rapidly growing, right? The goal was to scale, as fast as we could across segments, across geographies, and exceptionally high performing team. And like when I look back at that time in my life, I think like a lot of professionals, right? When those times end, you're kind of always on the hunt to recreate that magic, right? You're on the hunt to find that high performing team. You're on the hunt to essentially recreate what once was. And when I look back at that time, there's like a few things that just stand out. And for me, it was everyone knew what we were trying to do. There was no misalignment from any level in the organization of where we were trying to go and what we were trying to do and what we were trying to achieve every day, every week, every quarter, every year. And there was full accountability to it, but you trusted the leaders, right? Like, yeah, there was accountability. Yeah, there was radical candor before it was called radical candor, right? But you fully trusted your leadership and that you were moving in the right direction. You were not only advancing, your career, your individual performance, you were making more money, you were doing better, you were learning, but the company was as well. And to kind of just take it another step further, everyone on the team knew how their contributions every day contributed to the goal of the organization, right? And I think that's something on high performing teams that always exists. And for a lot of teams that are good or think they're great, it's missing, right? I think people can get stuck in like the daily minutia of your job and the tasks that you have to perform. But at the end of the day, when your individual tasks and you understand how those are tied to where the company's trying to go and where your team's trying to go, whatever it may be, it makes all the difference in the world. So when I look back at those high performing teams that I was a part of, those are like thematically exactly what a high performing team is for me.
Yeah, and I think we'll come back to clarity of mission and goal and accountability around that because I think that's really key. But you said something that you don't always read in a lot of leadership books or things like that, and that really kind of resonates with me. Trusting leadership, because I think you have zero capability of achieving, more than the sum of your parts or really like audacious goals if you don't completely believe in your leadership, trust in them. There's the credibility there. The minute there starts to be fissure there of like, I'm not sure this person is practicing what they preach, or I'm not sure that this person is the right person to be leading things. The minute those types of things start to creep up is when you really start to see things fall apart from a team perspective. We see it in sports all the time, which is why coaches and general managers are constantly getting fired. But some of the teams that are owned by owners who aren't very good leaders, they never seem to get better. They never seem to achieve more than the sum of their parts, right? And anytime they fall into some level of success, it's happenstance and doesn't stay happening for very long. And so you see this in business, you see this in sports, you see this in, academic environments. When I think back to the highest performing team that I've ever been a part of or led, there was some sports teams growing up. There were some things that, different jobs I had. But the one that really stands out to me, and Corey will remember this well, is the first, 3 or 4 or 5 years of MSH, right? And at the time, there was 3 partners, okay? And I think we had pretty clearly defined roles, right? I was kind of the operator, I was the manager, I was the systems builder, right? We had another partner that was very sales focused, really, really amazing at selling, and was able to bring in great relationships and great clients. And then the third partner had more of a technical background, was a little more senior in his career, had been in large enterprise companies in the past, and really understood how to kind of put the systems in place to kind of get a company going, and had a level of gravitas that we needed. And then we started hiring people like Kurt, right? And Corey and Tomas, right? And so what's really cool about that is that you can start to see things starting to kind of form, right? At first you're like, okay, we're starting a company, like, now what? Like, we went on, LegalZoom and opened up the company, and then we set up an email, and we're starting to look at offices, but like, what makes you a real company? And I think there's a few different things that come to mind. One was, again, it was a clearly defined understanding of what we needed to do and what success looked like. We need to get off the ground. We need to make money. We had the gun to our head. No one wanted to be a failure in this space and go back to our families or spouses and say, that risk I took, it didn't work. So we were all in on this shared goal of getting off the ground and getting the company going and becoming a real company, right? I think another thing that really stood out was that we all understood what our different roles were, but there was also a level of versatility, because when you're in a startup, like, you can't be the person who's like, I'm not taking out the garbage, that's not my thing, or I'm not the person that's going to go talk to this customer. Like, you kind of got to be very clearly defined in what your strengths are, but also able and adaptable to taking on different things, because if you don't, no one else is going to do it, and then it just doesn't get done. And then the last thing I'm going to bring up that I think was kind of key to the success, we hired great, Corey being part of that, right? We could talk, we knew how to sell, we had good relationships, we had a really good offering, all of those things, right? But I'm going to tell you what, we had this kind of like, all of us were friends prior to coming together, which happens with a lot of partnerships. We had this interpersonal dynamic that I think rubbed off on the way we worked together, and then ultimately what that meant for the people that worked under us and how the company started to grow. And I'll tell you what, over time, that kind of came apart, which happens when you start to have success over a long enough timeline. But there was a little bit of a work hard, play hard mentality at the time. And Corey can attest to this. Things that I won't even admit on a live podcast or video that we were doing. Probably not things that you'd be proud to tell your parents or your friends. But we were just like young guys that were just like feeling our oats and like doing our things and like working hard and then going out and grabbing drinks and meeting up for this and doing this. And, it just felt like everything we did was together. And so there was this level of like trust, and there was this level of like appreciation, right? That went beyond the dynamic of like, we're just players on a team, that there was more care and concern there that I think really allowed us to flourish. And again, I would tell you those same dynamics over time probably led to a little bit of being pulled apart. But I feel like this idea of like, I like to work with the people I'm working with, right? Whether I like them or not is not as important as I respect them and I appreciate what they bring to the table, right? And I think that mutual respect is really, really key. And hopefully us as leadership was trusted, which is why the company is where it's at today. So I think that's a really interesting thing.
Yeah, well, let me kind of double click on that from the trust perspective. So I agree. I think that's good across leadership, right? Partnerships, high level, whatever you want to call your executive leadership teams and everything, have trust in each other or together. But I think as you kind of filter it down through an organization, the trust factor for me kind of changes scope, right? And the reason why trust in leadership is so important is because there is tension and there is conflict and there is...
Oh, hold on. I want to double down there. I wanted to ask you about that because you and I were discussing this idea of great teams have healthy conflict, okay? Now let's use an example of non-healthy conflict. We all, we like sports. I think you remember a few years ago, right? The Warriors had a really big run, right? And they were starting to kind of bring a new team together, and it kind of felt like they weren't kind of coming together. And then everybody saw this video where their all-star player, Draymond Green, punched one of the younger players in the face Jordan Poole over some sort of like slight or conflict. Okay. That and that they didn't have a very good season after that, right? That, in my opinion, is unhealthy conflict.
Yes,
But
I think I would agree that punching.
You agree with that?
Is
Can we all get an agreement? Corey, do you agree with that? Is that unhealthy
I
conflict?
was just going to say, I don't know if I would want to go punch Matt in the face. I certainly wouldn't want to get punched by him in the face. So I don't think we would
No, definitely not. This guy's like into like Krav Maga and
Yeah,
like
Krav-
Muay Thai, and
There's zero
Yeah,
problem
for
with
sure.
it. I like.
I don't know about fighting, bro. You're some sort of UFC dude, MMA, okay? Some sort of mixed martial
I'm
art.
not. I can handle myself.
Anyway, nobody wants to get punched in the face by you, Draymond. But then but here's the opposite of that. When there's no conflict, when people don't want to speak up, when people aren't willing to disagree with leadership or each other, right? And that is also maybe just as bad, right? And we've seen it before. So I'm just interested, Matt, what is healthy conflict? What does that mean? What does that look like? And how do you develop it and make sure it doesn't turn into the punching kind?
Yeah, well, I'll just circle back here. I don't think punching anyone is healthy conflict in any scenario, whether it's in sports or life or specifically work. But I think, the conversation that you and I were having about healthy conflict is like real results come from conflict, right? Real growth comes from tension. If you're running an organization, whether it's a staffing organization or a SaaS organization or whatever it may be, if everything's hunky-dory and everyone's getting along all the time, I can almost guarantee you are not accelerating the growth the way that you want. Because and we got to start to navigate ego and all that type of stuff too as we get further down, this conversation. But everyone on the team relies on everyone on the team to achieve their individual goals, whether that's, your KPIs and OKRs as an organization, whether that's your financial goals as an individual, whether it's financial goals as a team or a company, right? So there are always going to be times when you feel as a leader, as an employee, that someone else isn't necessarily pulling their weight, or that you're being held up by the actions or lack of actions by someone else on your team. Hopefully that's not leadership, but anywhere across the organization. And people need to be able to have, we'll call it healthy conflict or hard conversations with the people around them to achieve what you want to achieve. Now, I don't think people should go around screaming at each other and calling each other out and, causing scenes. But I think being able to say like, hey, I need to get this done and my piece is being held up by you. Like, what do we have to do together to get to this outcome that we need? I mean, that's a healthy conflict. And some people struggle just being able to say that, right? Some people struggle receiving it. And when I go back to like what I think a high performing team was and why trust is so important is if you trust those people, you trust your leadership, and we come down and say, hey, we're having a problem getting to our goal. There's a bottleneck. It's here with you. Here's what we need to change moving forward. If you trust your leadership, you're thinking, okay, this is what it actually takes. This is what's required to get to where I want to go. They're asking me to do this because it's for the betterment of the team. It's betterment for me. And you can go into it with kind of an open heart and open eyes on it. When you don't have trust there, it comes off like you're being needled to do shit you don't want to do. And then no one wins. And then back to the healthy conflict piece. Again, I can't think of any high performing team where there's not conflict. Hopefully it's healthy conflict, but there's tension, right? What's that old iron sharpens iron, right? That's that old saying. It's true.
Matt, so I got a quick follow-up to that, okay? And I'm going to get a little bit inside baseball here.
Oh boy.
And I know you love that analogy because you're a big baseball fan, but
We
were talking about how the dynamics of leadership and like the line team, there seems to be that calling what we see, healthy feedback, accountability. But you mentioned to me that more side to side, right? Some of the people that are relying on each other to, work with a client or representing a candidate or managing a candidate to an offer, right? That you're not seeing that. And you and I talked about like, well, how can we develop that? What can we do, right? In some ways, because everybody's nice and nobody wants to rub people the wrong way. And you want to be careful. You don't want to be the reason that somebody gets in trouble at work, right? I get all that. But I'm a big believer that not giving feedback is selfish. As long as your intent is good and you actually care about the outcome and you're not making personal attacks on people, then it should be really healthy to be able to communicate these things. But I see, especially people younger in their careers, it's a little bit harder to do that. And you and I talked about this idea of maybe like training ways to give feedback in a way that's not personal, but helps enhance the situation, enhance the outcomes. Anything you can elaborate on there, right? That you would say is what you would do if somebody, a leader's looking to trying to create this healthy conflict in their organization?
I'll give you a bunch. One, as leaders trying to create healthy conflict or allow healthy conflict, I would say it's more allow than force, right? We don't necessarily force conflict. But I think from a leadership perspective, you have to stop solving everyone's problems, right? A lot of times what I say, whether it's internally here with MSH or it's with, youth sports that I coach, or whether it's with anywhere else in my, professional career, when there are like interpersonnel problems that pertain to work, right? Not HR related type stuff that real focuses on the performance of the company. All the times it's, hey, I hear what you're saying. I hear that there's an issue between multiple teams, multiple peoples, whatever it may be. I'll tell you what you should do and you need to go figure it out. Right? Because I think you mentioned people are even more junior in their careers. I think it's not so much that they don't want to get that result. It's that they don't know how, right? They don't know how to influence without authority, right? Which is really what it comes down to. So, instead of calling someone out, use that example that I said before, like, hey, we're being held up here. There is definitely a bottleneck or something on your side. Like, we need to figure out together how we're going to get to this outcome. Where do we start? Right? That's healthy conflict, right? Because it brings two people to the table. Some people might feel defensive about it. Some people might feel like they're on offense doing it. But if things are positioned for the betterment of a scenario, betterment of the company, betterment of the team, whatever it may be, then there's a mutual obligation to solve that problem. What happens, what I see in organizations is people bring all their problems up. They bring all their problems to a manager, to a leader, to a VP, to a director, to a CRO, CEO, whatever it may be. And what's our natural instinct? Well, I'm going to go end this now because I don't want to deal with it anymore, right? We're going to fix this problem. It's not going to be a problem anymore. My edict has been set down and we're going to move on. Whereas probably the right scenario is to say, okay, here's how I would handle this if I was you. Go execute on it. Let me know how it goes. It's more that like, go figure it out, and you will. And eventually what you'll have is people who, one, will need to escalate stuff all the time. Not that we're discouraging that, right? You definitely want to, know if there are large problems and bottlenecks, but a lot of these things can be solved just by taking a little bit of initiative and removing the fear of it. Like, no one's going to hate you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's really key there, Matt, though, is like I think you have to be okay with a little bit of error rate as a leader, right? Knowing that this is better for the long term, right? And then I think you also have to look at, which decisions the risk or the downside is so significant where, well, maybe you do have to be a little bit more hands-on. But I agree with you. I think the people that are not thinking about that are not blurring those lines well enough. Like I think they think that everything is a big risk, or they're worried too much about error rate. And quite frankly, it's one of the things that I've had to learn over the last couple of years that you can't come in and be Superman because otherwise the company never scales. You never develop people. People might leave, right? Or you get left with, or they stay and you get results that you haven't actually taught them how to think or react and respond because you've always been there to take care of the situation. And I think a lot of founders and managers go through this, and it's something that as you evolve, you have to change.
Yeah.
Corey, I want to ask you this.
But I want to add one more piece to that.
Sure, Matt.
Perspective. I think a lot of people in leadership roles, managers, whatever it may be, right? They get a lot of their inherent value by taking or things that happen. Again, it's ego when it comes into leading an organization or leading a team. The goal is to facilitate the outcome, not to solve everybody's problems. And if you can take that piece out of your, overall mentality that solving everyone's little problems is good, what's good for the goose, good for the gander. Like it's not, right? Allowing people to navigate their issues in a healthy way is your job as not to solve everyone's piddly ass problems all the time. It doesn't help.
And you're a really good leader in that way. I've observed that and seen that with you, and I think you made our organization better with that. Corey, I want to ask you something real quickly. So psychological safety. I read a lot of high performing team books. Read a lot about the importance. That's another thing though. Like with conflict that can go, the two extremes of it cannot be good. And I'll relate what I saw in the last few years here at our company and what one extreme can look like. I'm interested from your perspective. Okay. On let's talk about your time at MSH. I'm interested to know about your own personal psychological safety, because I imagine when you first started, I don't know if it was high or not, but as you've grown in the organization, you're the number 2 employee, you've been here for a long time, right? I imagine there's some level of like, you've got to stay self-motivated because some of the things that maybe, more recent hires or people who haven't been here as long, maybe you're thinking different things than they're not. I don't want to say anything it's not, or maybe you've always kept that edge that you could get fired tomorrow and that you're always playing that way. But I'm actually more interested in what you've seen in the evolution of the organization, having been here, 13, 14 years, the psychological safety and this idea of that? Is it something that you felt and seen from up for other employees? And what does it mean to you in terms of the work environment you've been in here?
That's a great question. I'm naturally kind of curious to keep learning and challenging myself. So a lot of it is self-motivation, Oz. But when I came in, frankly, I didn't know anything about the business or the industry. So there was certainly a pretty steep learning curve as it relates to that. And my approach was just immerse myself in it, learn from people who are really great in this space, and just ask a bunch of questions and just keep your mouth shut. That's how you're going to learn it. That's how you're going to learn how to do it the right way and how to do it the wrong way. And there's no faking it at that point. Like, there's only so much that I can know or understand if I don't know a whole lot. So very little psychological safety probably in the early days, just because I didn't know better. And I also wanted to see if this is something that I love to do. Is it something that I enjoy? Am I going to meet a bunch of interesting people? And that's actually what I love about the business the most is you learn about every different type of function and industry and big company and small company, all different types of challenges at a macro level, at a micro level, and obviously internally within the company and about yourself. And so I think as I've grown in my career at the company, I wouldn't say my psychological safety net has gone up. I still feel like rent is due every day. But I feel like it's opened my eyes in terms of the possibilities, where at the beginning it was really kind of living for myself. And then now that I've had team members that rely on me, kids that rely on me, right? People that, look for me for advice or for coaching or guidance or whatnot, I need to show up for them. And I still have a lot to learn to become a better professional leader from that perspective. So I wouldn't say it's caused me to take a step back or get comfortable or complacent at all. It's, if anything, as I've gotten older, I've realized I don't know anything. And when I think I know, I need to keep pushing myself and talk to people that are experts in that space if I'm going to have any shot at understanding what it is. That's been my experience so far.
That's really interesting. I love like getting to see it from somebody else's perspective. I'm going to give a little bit of perspective. Like, company started in 2011. I think you came late in that year. Like I said, number 2 employee. I'm just going to be open and honest. I don't think there's ever been a point, you, Kurt, or Tomas, right, or our number 1, 2, 3 employees that we've hired, where there was ever a conversation about like, well, should this person be here or not? And maybe that's because like when you first start a company, you're just so grateful that anybody's like willing to jump on the ride with you. And like, you're like, oh my God, we got an employee. Like they want to work here. This is crazy, right? And you guys, I think that self-motivation is really key. Like, you've always performed, you've always tried hard, even when you weren't having the results and success. Like, you built up enough benefit of the doubt where we knew this person has it in them. It's on us to try to get them there. And that's been the case for 14 years that you ascended through the company. What's interesting is I look back at myself and my growth and my degrowth or whatever it may be over the last 14, 15 years. When the company first started, it was very much like all hands on deck. We all got to do everything we can, work. Like, it's just like everybody was focused on that mission and goal. Let's prove this out, okay? And I would tell you that, let's be honest, there's probably a little bit of a bro culture. I think we hired our first, female in 2013. So like 2 years into the company. And then from there, like, it kind of slowly started. And then I got to tell you, like in 2018, 2019, like I think we had more female employees than male employees. So over time, we did a really good job of kind of bringing more diversity into the organization, different experiences, things like that. But I would say even like 2013, 14, 15, it was like, competitive. We would play beer pong after work. We would talk trash to each other. We'd be in a fantasy football league. There was a little bit of like, listen, I was younger. We were younger, a little bit of machismo, right? Not the type of thing that you would look at and say, this is like a organization that is the paradigm of psychological safety. And like, if anything, it was a little bit of a Shark Tank. Okay. We had partners leave in 17 and 18. We talked a little bit about, I don't want to generalize, but we had more females in the organization. There was more experienced people in the organization. We had our big India office and team. And so now things started to, like, whether you want it or not, like, you need to start acting more like a big company. And I actually took that pretty seriously and pretty, I was like, well, we got to do this. I'm the CEO in 2019. I got to run a big macro global company that is best places to work and that has a fantastic HR organization and all these different things, right? And so, Sammy, who we all know is a big part of our company, been here 9 years now, going on 10. She had taken over HR, highly empathetic, highly putting people first. And I would tell you that, like, over the last, 5 years, like, especially, like, let's say 2020 to 2023, I probably started reading my own press clippings. I probably started feeling like I want to be seen as the people first leader. I want to be seen as the person that goes, gives the shirt off his back to his employees and takes less money all the time to give it to them. And as much as I was actually doing those things, I probably, if I'm being honest, like, I had some ego in it. I wanted to be known as that. I wanted people to want to come work here, right? For that reason. And honestly, if I'm being real, like, I would tell you there in that 3-year timeline, if we took a snapshot, my Q rating as a CEO is probably pretty high because I was like I don't know, to a point of being too understanding, too empathetic, all these different things. The psychological safety at this company, in my opinion, was at an all-time high. In fact, I know there were people here that were fucking up left and right, and they were like, it'll be all right. It's okay. These things happen, right? And I think I kind of came to this realization over like the course of 23, maybe a little bit of 24, and started to realize, oh, our culture has shifted to one that is probably too understanding, and where performance is too much of a secondary thing, and the competition had kind of gone out the door, and that was something that bothered me, because I don't think that was innately who I am. It's certainly not how I grew up or how we built the company, but it's something I had believed that was the right thing to do, and it had gone too far. All of those things are super important, but it had probably become too much of a focus and not enough of a focus. And what I realized is that we were losing people, and people are looking at me like, hey, we're not growing anymore. Like, that's on you. I need to make money here. I need to be able to grow and develop. And I realized I was actually letting down people by doing the very thing that I thought was needed to do. So I had a little bit of a transformation in my mind. I had to change. I had to bring in people that saw it that way. Enter Matt Gorman, right? Not that he was only this extreme, but he certainly brought us more to the center and has done that. And I would tell you right now, I feel really good. I don't know if the psychological safety is at the all-time high it was 3 or 4 years, but I don't know if that's a great thing. So I'm just interested in any of your opinions on this. You guys have met, Corey, you've lived it throughout the time, and then Matt, you've come in recently. Matt, why don't you start? What do you think about anything I've said?
I think how
or what
we're
you've
defining psychological safety is kind of the key thing here, right? Because there's a difference between creating a country club environment, right, and creating an environment that is safe, right? But for lack of a better word, and I don't mean safe in like,
Well, define it. What do you mean? Like the ability to speak up, the ability to take risks?
Listen, I think one thing this company, specifically MSH, has in spades is there is positive connotation to bringing up ideas, right? There's a positive connotation to challenging ideas, right? You can say like, hey, I don't think we should be doing this. And I'm not saying, well, let's write this person off. They're not part of the team. No, and quite the opposite, right? I can give exact examples, but I'll just give like overview. I mean, we've rolled out a few things where I've had some people come to me and say like, I don't think this is going to work here. I think we got to kind of revamp it. My first reaction was, well, no, I'm pretty smart and I know what I'm doing. So we're going to roll it out my way. My first reaction was like, okay, well, tell me what you think we should be doing, because we have to address this, but what do you think we should be doing? And I'm thinking of 2 specific examples in my mind. What we came up with together was much better than the original plan. Now it was on the same path, right? It was to the same outcome, but it was a very different approach. And these weren't people sitting in the decision-making meetings, right? These were people who are operators in the business saying like, I don't think we should do this. And it was like, okay, well, let's work through it. There was no fear that they were going to be, demonized for challenging the idea, or that they were going to be on the cutting block because, they had a different point of view from leadership. No, there's trust. So you're safe to speak up. I think that's very different than having a culture where you just feel comfortable doing whatever the hell you want.
Finding the right talent for your team doesn't have to be a struggle. Meet Aon Hire, the world's first hiring experience management platform designed to transform the way you hire. Powered by AI, Aon Hire takes the hassle out of every step in the process. From smart resume analysis to customized interview questions, it saves you time, money, and effort. Plus, with real-time insights from every interview, you can quickly identify top candidates, reduce turnover, and stay on budget. And forget about note-taking, Aon Hire takes care of that for you. Ready to revolutionize your hiring process? Visit aonhire.com and get started today.
Yeah, so Matt, let me tell you what the issue was.
That's
I was conflating those two things. You're right. You're 100% right. There's a difference between I can speak up, I can innovate, my ideas are heard, I can challenge leadership, right? In the right way, versus I can mess up and it doesn't matter. I can do what I want. I don't need to earn my spot in the team. I conflated those two things, which was the problem. And you're absolutely right. Driving a line between those two things are two very different things. You can create psychological safety without creating a country club. Corey, what's your point of view? What did you see? Do you agree with what I was saying?
I do, yeah. I think, like, we deal with a lot of failure in this business, right? Like, frankly, we exist because we do something that a lot of companies they don't want to do themselves, or they can't do themselves. So if you're not operating with that in mind, extremely high sense of urgency, and just knowing that most of the time you're going to be failing in this business, then you're already starting from behind. So I think working with people that, specifically leadership, but also people like, I think the goal of any company should be to hire A players, right? You want A players around, as many as possible. I think we're in the sweet spot too. We're not a massive 10,000 person organization. It's also not the three of us just running a company either, right? So it gives, we give a lot of the employees this platform to be able to speak their mind and speak up, because we need them to, because they're the ones doing the work. We need them to tell us what's happening in the market, what they're dealing with, what the frustrations are. The big thing for me is, don't come to me with a problem without a solution as a team member, right? Because everyone wants to voice what the challenges are and the problems are. Well, you need to think through a couple of different solutions as well. Let's talk through those. But you have to fail to be able to move forward and improve as you move forward. And to take the next step in your career, just get better at something. And so that's one thing I love about the organization now, and really this ecosystem that we've created of support for people, to where they feel like they can bring up anything. And everything's going to be heard. Some of this stuff might be used across the organization. Some of this stuff just right then and there, maybe one time. Other stuff, maybe we table it for down the road, but we don't have it all figured out. That's one thing that's great about it. And if you're not thinking about better ways to do things, then you might be getting left behind, so to speak. And so I think we've created this culture that really fosters that type of stuff. I mean, innovation is one of our 8 corporate values. So we're constantly seeking. I look for ideas. Tomas and I are constantly, we're in a similar role. We're constantly bouncing ideas off each other for doing something, as long as we've done it, to learn brand new things pretty much on a daily or a weekly basis. To me, is special. A lot of the stuff I've learned from him, hopefully he's learning things from me and other team members. You don't get that unless you're communicating, you're talking, you're sharing ideas, and picking little things. It's like a sports team, right? You see this one guy has a great shot. This guy's really great handles. This guy has a great defense. You pick up little things from each person's game to add them to your tool belt. And you can't do that unless you're all working together on those things and learning from each other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that's key here is that culture is a living, breathing organism. It evolves. It evolves as your company changes. It evolves as you bring in one person, 10 people, whatever it may be. And that's what I think has happened to our organization. It's not that you have it and you set it and forget it. It's that it evolves and you learn and you learn what works. And I'm feeling really good about where we're going and where we're headed. So now let's ask this.
Hold on, Oz, can I circle back to the psychological safety aspect? Because something that Corey said really kind of spurred it in my mind here. If you, how do you judge if you're of a psychologically safe organization, right? There's a lot of different ways to do that. I think one of the ways, I'm just picking up on what Corey said, how many people admit when they've made a mistake, right? How many people can openly say, hey, I made a mistake here, I'm going to fix it moving forward, as opposed to leadership or managers having to find it and call it out, right? You have a psychologically safe organization when someone proactively comes I made a mistake. I made a mistake, I'm moving it. I definitely understand what I did wrong. I understand what I missed, and it's not going to happen again. And we say, awesome, go get some. That's psychologically safe. Having to hunt down, find people hiding mistakes or errors. This is a business of failures. To Corey's point, we're all going to make mistakes all the time. I made a mistake this morning. Called it out right away. Made a mistake. Sorry. I'll circle back on this. No one cares, right? If you admit it, you move forward. If you hide it, it's not a safe place. If you feel you need
a couple of things come to mind on that. So one is it the person? Is it the environment? Is it some combination of both? And I think it's some combination of both for sure. I think you have to hire people that are low ego, but then you have to create an environment where they feel good to be able to say, I messed up. I told you this story the other day. There was a time where I used to open up our meetings with things I fucked up this week. And I tried to say, hey, here's a mistake I made or something I did, because I wanted this to be an environment of this is imperfection. We know we're learning and we're working together. And if I can do it, then you can do it. It got waylaid by some advisors of mine that said, I probably shouldn't do this for XYZ reason. But it was just trying to set the tone really on it's okay. It's not okay to make a mistake as much as it's okay to admit I messed that up and take accountability. And that is another one of our big values. And I just feel like I actually look at the values on the wall and I take the responsibility of them as I walk in every day and say, I've got to live up to that. I've got to live up to the accountability. I've got to live up to the respect, the quality, the customer focus, the innovation, the will to win. Like, I look at those as like, especially as the founder of the company, that I have to wear those on my sleeve and live those every day, or else no one else will. And so that's where it becomes really, really important. And to your point, being accountable and looking inward is really important when things go wrong, because we can always blame the external factors, right? But what is it we have control of? And I always feel like it's more than we realize and more than we want to give credit. And so I always try to lean into that. Now let's talk about bringing people into a high-performing team, because I think that's a really important thing too, right? So we're headed in a direction. We've got some people here that have had success. We have like 8 years, 10 years. You know, we're talking today about how we need to start doing our polos again that have like the medals of like what year you came in to show tenure. That's a source of pride here at this company. But you know, it can be really tough selecting people. And by the way, we got to be damn good at that, because we go and advise our clients on hiring. So we better do it ourselves really well. But then how do you like get them to join this high performing team and get them to be included and feel like part of it? And is there a timing to that? Are there things that we should do for that? Because that can be very hard. It can be very intimidating as a new first day at a new school, first day at a new company, first day on a new team, right? So just interested, Matt, what are your thoughts there?
How do you continue to scale the culture of psychological?
Well, how do you indoctrinate? Maybe the wrong word, but how do you bring people and add to your team so that it's additive and not diminishing?
Yeah, well, you know, I hate to be like super direct as we're talking about this in this format, but
how else would I want you to be, Matt? You got to be super direct.
Every team drafts a wrong player. Right? Every team brings in a piece that they think is spot on at the time, or, you know, a snapshot in time that it makes sense. And it's like,
okay, hold on. I'm going to stop you right there. And I'm going to ask a question that I ask on my podcast of guests.
All right.
So when you miss, Matt, because we all miss, is there a theme there? What is it like you saw? Like, did you just want to give it a chance? Like, is there any theme on when you miss on someone, when you drop that bad running back, right? What usually happened in your process that you look back and you want to try to fix the next time?
I overemphasize on previous success. And I would say that's probably, you know, I've said this to you before, like I've been in this business and parallel businesses for just about 19 years. So good amount of time. I always thought I was really good at hiring, really good at interviewing. Like I do what I wanted. I can get what I want. Yeah. My success rate of hiring was like, you know, just 50-50, right? Like, and then I always just played it up to like, that's just how it goes, right? Like you got to build some people in. Some people are going to hit it. Some people are going to be credentialed enough, but they're just not going to fit the team. And that was the wrong approach. And as I look inward in this, a lot of times I over-index to previous successes, not necessarily their skills, not necessarily, you know, what they're capable of, what they've learned, how they've been trained, but saying like, I was able to do X, Y, Z at this company. Well, it's a different company, different structure, different team, different culture. None of that truly matters, right? And I think my big misses came from that. And I think as I'm progressing, maturing, hopefully, professionally, I don't know about personally, but maturing professionally, is that I'm really looking for people, like you said, who you want to be around, right? Who, you know, come into this office, come into this company and can get along in the culture that we have and de-emphasize, if that's the right word, you know, the previous successes, because the right person will be successful here. And
and I want you to build on that thought, but I want to add one thing to it real quick.
Yeah.
I think we all love shortcuts. We all love heuristics. We all love to, like, you know, and I think another thing people do is not just look at the previous success, but they look at the name of the company, or they look at the school that they got a degree from. And I'm just going to tell you like it is. Some of the dumbest fucking people I know graduated from Harvard, and some of the smartest people I know, you know, have a high school degree, and that's it. And some of the people that I've been least impressed with work-wise worked at Amazon or Meta, and some of the people that I've been most impressed with work for a company you never even heard of. Sometimes I see somebody work in the coffee shop down the street, and I'm like, wow, they are really good at what they do, and they're really on top of it, right? So I think sometimes we get caught up in the names and some of the things like that. And to your point, not is it just previous success, it's, well, if they work there, they can work here. And that is one of the biggest mistakes that hiring leaders make, and that they got to get rid of that bias. Go ahead, Matt.
Say hiring for pedigree is not always the right approach, right? hiring for future success is the right approach. And that is an inherent gamble, right? You're always taking a risk when you hire a new player at any level for any role. There's a risk, right? And you try to mitigate as many of those risks mentally as you can. And usually you're going to defer to pedigree of companies, pedigree of, university or college that you went to, what titles they had, whatever it may be, right? You're just going to naturally defer to those as like, okay, I'm mitigating some of my risk because of X, or as it should be mitigating my risk based on how they acclimate to the business that's here.
Okay. So let's say you brought the right person in. Bullet pointed for me. What are the things you're going to do to make sure that they start to integrate into the team?
Oof, that's a great question. It's a big one too. I think team exposure, so organizational exposure, is a big piece of it, right? So let's say you're joining MSH, a talent company, as a recruiter. All right. In a normal situation, you're going to learn all the delivery aspects. You're going to learn all the tools. You're going to meet your manager and the 2 or 3 people on your team. And then you're going to have 2 weeks and you're in it, right? Trial by fire, and normally it's like, I hate this saying because it's so cliche, but it's like drinking from a fire hose for 2 weeks, right? And then you're just thrown overboard and it's like, figure it out. I think one of the things that companies may miss, or that I think is pretty critical when you're bringing them in, is getting them exposure to the entire organization. And that's something that we do really, really well here. When you come in as a recruiter, when you come in as an account manager, when you come in as a chief revenue officer, right, you are getting exposed to every individual in the organization, every leader in the organization, their teams, what they do, how it impacts the goals, or time back to the beginning of this whole conversation, right? There is no way that a new employee should start their job without knowing exactly what the entire company does, who they are, who to reach out to, creating some sort of familiarity or bond with, if you're a recruiter joining a large organization, you're never going to talk to the CFO. Never. It's very unlikely that your paths would ever cross. But having that connection and understanding what they do makes a big difference, especially at S&P, small to medium sized businesses. So if I'm bringing them in, it's that. And then the next phase is very detailed understanding of how your role affects the entire organization.
I don't care how big we get. We will never change that. You will understand who is who, what they do, and have some sort of connection with them at some point within your first 30 days or whatever it may be working here. I just think it's too important. I think the more we try to silo people into specific areas, and the less they understand the broader business, and when they need something, they know where to turn or they can ask a question, the better. So I think that's a really good thing we do from an onboarding perspective. Corey, what's something else you think we do well to integrate people into the organization?
I think we do a good job of communicating the gold standard, what you need to do in your role to be successful. I think anyone coming in, whether you have 20 years of experience or you're right out of school, you want to understand, once you go through onboarding, meeting the people, teams, process and stuff, what is expected of me? And how do I do it? I know a lot of this stuff I need to figure out, but I'm sure people have already done this before, and there's certain things I could pick up from others, but what are you looking to get from me so that I can look internally and understand what tools do I have that can help me get to that point? How long could it take? You almost reverse engineering it. So say it's a goal, you're a recruiter, and you want to close 20 deals your first year. Okay, how do I break that down to deals per month? About 2 deals per month. Okay, how many roles do I need to work on a weekly basis to get that many deals per month? I need to understand what I need to do to get the right sourcing and all that type of stuff, recruiting, funnel metrics in that particular role. And if I feel like there might be some misalignment there, or maybe there's something that I don't quite understand, I need to start there because we don't have it all figured out when we're coming. I've recently moved to a sales position myself. I've always kind of been in a sales type of role since I joined the organization. We all are. The more senior you get, we're all kind of in sales, but it's a very defined role. My job is to go bring on clients and build existing partnerships to help grow the company, bring in requisitions, bring in programs, etc., align resources to go get it done. I can't do that unless I have the tools that I need to be successful, but I also need to have the process down to know what I need to do to do that, right? To bring on clients, prospecting, all that type of stuff. And so once I understand that and I start to get my feet wet a little bit, that leadership, we're guiding you to get to that goal, but a lot of it, you're figuring it out yourself. It's really a day-to-day effort, right? That's where the self-discipline and consistency comes into place because you don't have it all fair. Our business is very simple, but difficult. Very simple. Get clients, bring in requisitions, fill them in a nutshell, right? We do a lot more than that, but to get to that end result, which is the placement, there's a lot in that can go wrong. where you need to identify what those things are. You need to understand what you need to do, what you have in your control, and then go execute on it. And then when you fail, learn from it. Easier said than done, to be able to fix it, course correct as you move forward and do it again the next time.
Yeah, so great answer. So what I heard from both of you is, right, the ability to define what the gold standard looks like, right, and understand that.
How building the team or about onboarding is getting
The integration into the team.
organization. Something, and again, I wanted to double click on that. When you're getting exposed to the entire organization, right? I think a lot of people would tell you, oh, it's not scaled. When you have 200 employees, you can't do that. False. You can definitely
Disagree.
You can definitely do that. If you prioritize it, does it have to be you spend 30 hours a week with the CFO? No. Can you spend an hour with them? Of course. And a good CFO, a good CRO, a good CEO, founder, they're going to prioritize it every time. So, yeah.
And as you get bigger, I think you can leverage things like technology, like even a Loom or like a welcome email or anything like that. Just that interaction point, like it helps. So the exposure you talked about, the understanding the goal standard, right? I'm gonna say that there's one other thing I think we do really well, and I want to admit there's some things I think we should improve on, right? I think we should have a buddy system. I think that's something we could be a lot better about in terms of like getting you somebody that your first 6 months is somebody that can take you to lunch, works with you, is kind of your go-to resource, right? That's something I think we should do better. I also think that there's something we can look at from a training perspective in that we give you a lot the first couple weeks. And I think some of it doesn't have context until 30 days, 60 days in. And so maybe breaking that up a little bit more or doing refreshing, I think is good. Although I think we do a really good job from a continuous training perspective. And I think, since you've come, Matt, we've even improved on that. And I think that's a really important thing. Training and learning and development is a continuous thing. But here's what I'm going to point out. Okay. And again, it's going to be a little fuzzy-wuzzy. But all right, first day you work here. Okay. We have our all hands meeting every Monday morning. What do? We introduce the new employees. We ask them a standard set of 5 questions, right? Why they came here, what they're passionate about, where they were born, right? Immediately, the organization gets to know something about them, right? At a high level. Then the following week, how was your first week? Tell us about the training. What stood out to you? Who'd you really connect with, okay? Those 2 things I think are small but important, right? Because now we're starting to give that person a voice. They're speaking up in front of 60, 70, 80 people right off the bat, right? And sometimes more. But we want to put people out there and have them be able to share those things. And then something that I also really, really appreciate.
Don't skip over the last one. That's the big one.
Is that we have them give a personal presentation, and oh my God, we have them give their definition of a high-performing team. Very, very salient. But the personal presentation, I think, is so important. And believe me, we've had some interesting ones. I'll just leave it at that, right? Where you learn a lot. But you learn about somebody. You learn about how they're constituted. They talk about their families, their friends, what's important to them, right? We have one guy that went on for 50 minutes, and literally the entire time his history with the company, like, because they're only supposed to be 15 to 20 minutes, we gave him shit that whole time about how he had, like, it was like War and Peace out here. Like, it was like the trilogy. Everything we ever needed to know about this guy. Corey, you're going to say something. What are you going to say?
No, I think it's a wonderful thing that we do that I don't think a lot of companies do out there. I'm just thinking, like, how can we incorporate this into the interview and hiring process, right? Sometimes we don't really learn about their upbringing and their sports background and adversity they've overcome and stuff like that until they've already worked here for 2 weeks. So now where my mind is going is how do we incorporate some of this stuff, maybe a toned down version, right? Or some questions we sent to the candidates before a final interview or something, right? On site, to understand some of these things that maybe we normally wouldn't learn during the interview process, right? Because it's eye-opening to me. I'm like, oh.
I think it's a really good idea. I think we have to think through it. Can you imagine somebody doing like a personal presentation? We reject them and they're like, probably shouldn't have said that my dad had 3 wives at one time or something like that, right? Like we got to be a little bit careful there.
Instant hire.
All right, guys, I want to wrap up here. We're all sports fans, right? So I want to ask you this. I want to know about the best high-performing sports team that you can think of in recent memory, but I want to know how you know, not based on their results. I want you to look at something different that told you how cohesive, how trusted, how great that team was, right? Because we all follow pretty closely, right? And give an example. I'll go ahead. I'll start, okay? And so just so you guys can think through one. And I don't necessarily love this team. I love the NBA, but I'm not, the finals have kind of been hit or miss for me so far. But I'm going to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder. And why I'm going to say that, right? Even though they're having success, the series is tied 1-1 now. They're favored to win. one of the things they're all a bunch of kind of younger guys, like on their way up in their career, guys who haven't established themselves. And Pat Riley very famously talks about the disease of more, right? When you win, that's when things actually become incredibly hard because now everybody's like, oh, well, I'm the reason why, or I need to get mine, or I need to get my numbers or my next contract. And when you're all kind of trying to achieve that big goal, that North Star, it's a lot easier to sublimate your ego and what you want. And Oklahoma City's done an amazing job of that because they have a lot of young players in their rotation that, quite frankly, could have played for a lot of different teams, including my Phoenix Suns, and had bigger roles and had bigger stats, which leads to more endorsements, but leads to no contract. But everybody's really bought in on this idea of being a team and coming together. And how do I know this? Because when you watch the post-game interviews, the individual will be standing there who had the best game, and they'll always bring the team around them, and they'll all be talking and saying, oh, yeah, and like pumping the person up and giving them love. And it seems maybe a little bit like, maybe it's contrived. I don't know, but it doesn't feel that way. It feels very natural. It feels very organic, and it's a beautiful thing when you see it because it's like, if they win this year, I don't know if it'll be that way next year. We'll see, right? The disease of more. But I can tell now they're all in on each other, and that matters, and that's why I think they're having success. Corey, go ahead.
This actually builds upon yours quite nicely.
Corey, go
I'm
ahead.
a baseball guy. I'm going to go with a hockey analogy here. Hockey example, Panthers, right? So if you're following the Stanley Cup Finals, the Panthers, this is their third season in a row. We are not known for hockey in Florida. In fact, many people that live here don't even know we have a hockey team until probably the last couple of years. The reason why I love this team, we made the finals 3 years ago. We lost against Vegas. We made the finals again last year, won against the best player, maybe the history of the game. In 7 against Connor McDavid, right? And his team, an Oilers team, whatever, top 5 of all time.
I love Connor McDavid, but you're not putting him ahead of Kraft yet, man. Get out of here.
He's top 5 probably all time. Listen, whatever.
He's by far the best player in the game. But the point
is, we lost the year before with the same coach, Paul Maurice, and a lot of the core guys like Barkov, these captains, these guys that have been with the team for like 9, 10, 12 years. That did nothing. We're not winning. We're just failing. We're losing. We're not doing anything. We get Paul Maurice. We continue to kind of build and chip away, make the championship, lose, make it the next year, win in 7, and then make it again this year as a rematch. You would think this year, it's still early, we're up 2-1, but you would think this year we go down 0-1, we lose the first game. This is the turning of the tides, right? Our season's over. McDavid, the Oilers, this is their time. We go out, we win game 2. We go on into home, we win game 3 last night in commanding fashion, right? And what stood out to me in the game last night is the Oilers were dealing with tons of failure and adversity, and they start cross-checking our guys and fighting and like doing the exact opposite of what you want to see in terms of leading by example and like overcoming and adapting and stuff. The Panthers, alternatively, are the team we've been here before. We know what we got to do. They're doing the mind game thing. We're doing the physical thing. Like they are out. We just outplayed them every single minute of that game, which as a fan gives you confidence in your team, but you know that starts with the players. And I will say of all sports, I've never played hockey in my life. I'm a fan of the game because that amongst most sports, I feel like those guys play for each other across all lines. Like there's not one person more important than anyone else on that team. It truly is a team game. Say what you want about basketball. There's 5 people out there. You have your superstar, your super team. You have your quarterback on the football field. You have Aaron Judge playing center field for the New York Yankees, hitting 60 home runs a year. Hockey seems to me like it's a little bit different and way more cohesiveness. And in times of adversity to overcome like they did after game 1 has been pretty cool to see for me. So
I know Matt's chomping at the bit, but I do want to add one thing here. So I agree with what you're saying. And what's really interesting about that is universally, I'm going to use a term here that's not great, but Florida Panthers are known as a dirty team. Like, in fact, they're like throwing elbows. They're physical. They're like, and I just found it interesting that in that game last night, you could tell that Edmonton went in and like, well, we're going to give them a taste of their own medicine. And then Florida actually didn't react and respond the way you did. Like you said, they played in a way where it's like, we've been here. We know what they're trying to do. We're the more physical, mentally strong hockey team. Now I got to say this, I'm going to make some enemies out here in Florida. I'm not a big hockey guy as it is. Okay. I have a buddy, a lot of my buddies are really into the Stanley Cup run right now. I did bet one of my close buddies. I took the Oilers because I want the story. I want McDavid to get his redemption, right? He is the best player probably since Gretzky. And he's pretty, he's getting up there in his years now. And I want him to get a cup. I'm cheering for them. So I made a bet. And if I win, I get a now defunct Phoenix Coyotes Kachina hat. And my buddy gets a Florida Panthers hat because I don't have any ties to the Edmonton Oilers. But we'll see. I'm down 2-1 now, so it looks like I might be buying a hat. You're up.
Definitely overlooking like Sidney Crosby, Alex Ovechkin, a couple of these other players, and we're putting Connor McDavid up there, but he's very good. I'll give you that. All right, best team is the 1998 Yankees, for sure.
Okay, well, how did you know outside of the World Series?
Well, a few things. One, the regular season record was exceptional. I don't remember the exact number, 114, 115 wins, so that's great. But you have a team of good amount of superstars, right? Who could have been the superstar go-to headliner on any team they wanted. And if they chose to be part of a team of other superstars, right? And not be the spotlight all the time, right? Which one I think is a big contributor to team success always. And if you watch a lot of these, obviously you're a big Yankees fan, right? If you watch a lot of these documentaries and interviews on the 98 Yankees or most of the late 90 Yankees, right? They always say, I was having a bad day. Someone else was maybe having a good day and we were going to be good, right? And that was, to me, that sticks out, right? Like you have a bad day, but you could trust the rest of your team. Someone's going to pick you up. Man, you have a good, high-performing team. The other thing from a little bit more of an aggressive side, right? When your pitchers are hitting other guys, when you get hit, yeah, you got some trust there, right? When you guys are in the dugout chirping at the other dugout because, they slide in spikes up a little too far off second base, you got a bunch of people that have your back. And I think when you have teams where everyone feels like someone's got their back, you're going to win. And I'm going to go to hockey because we just talked about hockey a bunch, and I'm a big hockey fan, Rangers fan, so not our best season, but, Rangers fan. One thing you always hear from hockey players, if you watch any post-game interview, any intermission interview, whatever it may be, it's always about the team. It's never about them. Always. I dare you to go find one where a hockey player talks about themselves. Like, oh, you had a great period. Well, all the boys played really good behind me. We were definitely good on the forecheck. Goalie stood on his head. Team's playing awesome. It's like, well, you got a hat trick in, 5 minutes. It's like, yeah, boys were playing really good. Behind me, defense was stopping everything. I got to be open on the outside. It was beautiful. It's never about them. And that's why I think people respect hockey players a lot. And they just,
Yeah, hockey definitely, and I think part of it is the spotlight is a little bit different. So I think that plays a little bit of a part, but it's also a different type of, like, there's a grinder, grit mentality of growing up. And also, like, there's a little bit of outlaw justice out there. If you're a prima donna and you make it about yourself, sometimes, like, you might not get that same, have people having your back and things like that. I'm going back to the Yankees real quick. My favorite Yankees team, 2001. Love.
yeah,
Lost in the World Series to the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Diamondbacks. Yeah, I'm aware.
Okay, just making sure.
Yankees were
Just
the
making sure
better
we're.
team.
That was a great Yankee team.
Yankees were a better team, but
Here's what I'm gonna. Okay, because we talked about a lot here: psychological safety, healthy conflict, right? Integration, right, into a team, right? Trust. But the number one thing I took from all of that, and it just was crystallized in this last sports analogy: we before me. Every great team is we before me. That's how we'll wrap it up. Appreciate it, guys. Thanks for being part of my high-performing team. Our high-performing team. My mistake. Don't cross-check me.
don't give me a reason. See ya.